Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed the process of working through the new technical exercises, warm-ups, and repertoire that I introduced at our last lesson. Hopefully you had a chance to run through your major and minor finger patterns and some of the other items on your practice assignment just before you began today's lesson. If not, you may wish to take a few minutes to play a few major finger patterns, your F and B minor finger patterns, and skip to my Lou. I'd like to begin our lesson today by playing through the Diabelli dance. Try to play it hands together and maintain a steady tempo throughout. Get your hands in place. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. How did you do? Were you able to stay with me? If you got behind, do you know where the hesitations were? That will help you to know which spots to isolate and repeat until comfortable. Were you able to jump back in to join me following little mistakes? Hopefully you were. Next, let's assess some of the technical details. Was your right hand fingering accurate? Did you remember the right hand shifts at measures 5, 9, and 11? And if not, you might circle these changes on your score to give yourself a heads up, so to speak, about the hand shift. Then, did you play your right hand melody legato or smoothly? Let's try this once again. This time, I'd like you to focus on the right hand techniques of shifting and legato as you play. I'll play both hands. Depending on your level of comfort, you may choose to play both hands or the right hand only. Either way, please focus on your right hand technique this time. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. Next, let's take a moment to assess how steady your left hand broken chords were when you played. Did you play the left hand completely steady, or did you pause prior to some or all of the chord changes? Also, was your left hand softer than your right hand melody? If not, you'll want to practice again, focusing on the left hand steadiness and balance with the right. Finally, were you able to execute all of the dynamic and expressive markings on the score? Remember that there is a mezzo piano in the first measure, so you will want to play the first phrase moderately softly. Then at measure 5, you increase to a mezzo forte dynamic level, which you'll maintain until measure 13. At the end, you will add a slight ritardando or gradual slowdown and hold the final notes for the full 3 beats. Most of my students need an additional week to refine this dance because it is quite complicated. So I've included it in your practice assignment for another week. Next, I'd like to review the D minor 5-finger pattern and chord progression. Let's play the 5-finger pattern first. Your hands will only need the white keys for this pattern. Here we go, 5-finger pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I'd like to play the staccato and legato warm-up number 1 that we learned last time. But let's just play the first 6 measures, so you'll only need your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, up, up, up. Okay, we haven't transposed in a while, so let's transpose the first 6 measures of this warm-up into D minor. Just shift your right hand into the D minor hand position. I'm going to keep it fairly high on the piano for comfort, and let's try this in D minor. First 6 measures only. 1, 2, and play. Down, up. Down, up. We'll use that technique again in a moment. Hopefully you looked at the D minor primary chord progression too. I'd like to play it with the left hand only right now. Remember, when we move to the 4-6-4 chord, the top note goes up a half step to B flat. And when we go to the 5-6-5 chord, the bottom note goes down a half step to the C sharp. Please try to remember these accidentals as you play the progression. D minor, 1, 2, and play. The key of D minor has 1 flat, B flat, in its key signature. So in a moment, we'll see this key represented with the key signature only, and no accidentals in front of the B's throughout the piece. Do you remember which major key had 1 flat in the key signature? Hopefully you recall that it's F major. Since D minor has the same key signature, we call it the relative minor of F major. That is to say that F major and D minor are related by their key signature. Since you are memorizing your major key signatures, I'll give you a trick for finding the relative minor. Once you've identified the major key, put your finger on that note. Then go down 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. This is the only time that you won't count the note that you start on. So now, when you first look at a piece, you'll have 2 options for its key, the major key or the relative minor key. Let's look at a new piece called Minor Romp. The title kind of gives away the fact that this will be in a minor key. But if you didn't see the title and looked at the key signature, you would know that the piece would be in F major or D minor. This will be important when we harmonize our upcoming melodies. If I look at the first measure, I see that the right hand is outlining a D minor chord, and the left hand is blocking a D minor chord too. This is a good indication that the piece is in D minor. Eventually, you'll come to recognize that C-sharp accidentals are quite common in D minor. So let's play the left hand of the minor romp. You may recognize the tonic, subdominant, and dominant 7th chords even before you play. If it is helpful for you to write the Roman numerals below the staff, feel free to do that. So get your left hand in place, and we'll try the left hand of the minor romp. 1, 2, and play. Tonic, 3, 4. 5, 6, 5, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Here comes 4, 6, 4, B flat on the top, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Next, let's preview the right hand melody. Do you recognize the legato and staccato articulation from the warm-up that we just played a few minutes ago? Although the notes are different and the rhythms change in measure 3, I'm confident that you'll be able to play the correct articulation. Because the stems go up in this example, the slurs are now under the staff, but they still connect the note heads together. So you may see slurs either above or below notes in music. How about if I demonstrate the right hand for you? Please watch and listen so that you catch all of the details. I'd like to draw your attention to 3 places on this score. First, look at measure 3. You'll see that the slur connects the first 3 notes to each other, so try to play all 3 notes with a legato articulation. Notice my arm motion and articulation here. Again. Next, in measure 5, notice that we do a finger substitution on the A in the last beat of the measure. It's a sneaky way to shift the right hand up a step to be able to reach the B flat. Measures 5 and 6 look like this. Finally, in the last measure, you'll notice that the second finger crosses over to the C sharp. If you look at the fingering above the staff, you'll see that I recommend that you keep your thumb tucked under and play the final D with your thumb. However, some people will prefer to stay in the new position and play the final D with finger 3. Since it's the last note of the piece, either fingering works. I'll let you try both and decide which you will practice. Here's how each fingering will look. First, the 1-2-1 fingering. Now, the 1-2-3 fingering. There is a lot to dissect and practice in minor rhomb, so take your time and work through it carefully after our lesson. You've been playing major 5-finger patterns since our very first lesson. Today, I think it's time to finish learning the remainder of the scale. Although it hasn't always been so, these days, most piano teachers teach a 1-octave scale using 2 tetrachord patterns joined by a whole step. A tetrachord pattern simply contains 4 notes, as the root tetra suggests. The pattern of intervals is a whole, whole, half. If we take 2 whole, whole, half patterns and join them with a whole step, we'll end up with all 7 notes of our major scale. You'll play 8 notes, but the top note is the tonic, an octave higher than where you began. So if we look at a piano keyboard and start on C, then superimpose the whole, whole, half pattern, and begin the next whole, whole, half pattern on G, which is a whole step above where the first tetrachord stopped, we'll have the 1-octave C major scale. In fact, when first figuring out the scale patterns on the piano, I recommend that my students use both hands and play the tetrachords with the 2nd through 5th fingers. I'll show you what I mean at my piano. I'll set up my left hand first with the 5th finger on C, then place my fingers over the whole, whole, half pattern. So finger number 2 will be on F in the left. Then I take the right hand finger number 2 and place it a whole step above F on G. Now I build my 2nd tetrachord. I'll play it like this. Try it with me this time. Get your hands in place. 1, 2, here we go. Now, let's figure out G major using the same procedure. Be sure that you're sitting far enough back from the keyboard so you can move your arms in front of your body. Place your left hand finger 5 on the G below middle C. Locate your notes by using the whole, whole, half step tetrachord pattern. Your left hand, finger 2, should be on the C. Now place the right hand finger 2 a whole step above C on D and build another tetrachord. Remember the F sharp with finger 4. Now, as you look at your pattern, you should see that there is one sharp, F sharp, just as you memorized for the G major key signature. So let's try G major together. Why don't we play it ascending, then repeat the top note, then descend. 1, 2, and play. I'd like to figure out one more scale right now. Let's do D major. Your left hand will be covering D, E, F sharp, and G. Then, a whole step higher than G, you'll place right hand finger number 2 on A and cover B, C sharp, and D. Now that you're in place, let's play the 1-octave D major scale up and down. 1, 2, and play. You can work on these two-hand tetrachord scales along with several others before our next lesson. Now, let's play the third crossover warm-up exercise that you prepared for today. Actually, I'd only like you to play the first 8 measures of the exercise, so you'll only need your right hand. Here we go. 1, 2, play. Now, I'd like you to transpose this to D major. Just remember to play F sharp. I'll go a little slower. 1, 2, play. Thumb, D, 2. D, E, F sharp, G, D. Now come down. 1, 2, 3, F sharp. Okay, at this point, I think you're ready to play the 1-octave D major scale with your right hand. That exercise just prepared you for the crossovers. Why don't you watch me play this scale? The important thing to remember is that on the way up, the fingering is 1, 2, 3, thumb. You have fingers available when the thumb comes under, but you do not use them. Instead, place the thumb under to play G. If you miss bringing the thumb under at this point, you won't have enough fingers left to play the remainder of the scale. Also, remember that the penultimate note is C sharp with your 4th finger. Let's try it ascending together. 1, 2, here we go. D, E, F sharp, thumb. Here's C sharp. Now, let's start at the top and come back down. This time, you'll start on finger 5 and use up all of your fingers. Once the thumb is on G, bring the 3rd finger over to F sharp and continue until your thumb ends on D. Here we go, starting at the top on D. 1, 2, 3, play. C sharp, thumb, 3, 2, 1. I'll show you the left hand. Please notice where the 3rd finger crosses over on the ascent and where the thumb comes under after the B on the descent. I'll let you work on D major on your own. You can review this video at any time, and the scales are written out with important fingering included in your music book. I've written each scale so that most of the notes are on the staff, not on ledger lines. In this instance, feel free to move your hand higher or lower so that you can practice each scale with ease. The fingering that you are learning for the D major scale will be applied to numerous other scales, including C and G major. So please look at those this week too. Also, there is no need to push yourself to play these scales hands together. There are very few instances in all of the advanced piano literature where one needs to play scales hands together in parallel motion. But you will have to play a scale or parts of the scale one hand at a time. So please practice these scales diligently. I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring intervals in more detail. As we learned earlier in our course, an interval is the distance between two notes. Hopefully by now you've begun to recognize intervals such as seconds, thirds, fourths, and fifths easily on the staff. First, I'd like to highlight the larger intervals that we'll begin to see more in our music. This is a sixth. This is a seventh. And this is an octave. It helps to remember that both the sixth and the octave go from a line to a space or a space to a line on the staff. Knowing this will help you to recognize these intervals quickly when reading music. It also helps to remember that the notes in the octave are quite far apart. The seventh, which you've seen as the outer notes of the root position dominant seventh chord, are a space to a space with two spaces in between, or a line to a line with two lines in between. When identifying intervals, however, musicians use even more specificity than the number such as fifth or sixth. We use either perfect, major, or minor to identify specific intervals. For now, you can consider all of the fourths, fifths, and octaves to be perfect intervals. You can expect that in either major or minor compositions, you will have perfect fourths, identified as a P4 on the score, perfect fifths, or perfect octaves. But intervals of a second, third, sixth, or seventh can be either minor or major intervals, and you'll learn to identify these specific qualities of the intervals when you both hear and see them. When you are trying to identify intervals either as major or minor, it helps to think of the bottom note in your interval as the tonic of the major scale. So here, D will be your reference point. You'll see that the B is a sixth above D. Now, in the D major scale, B is natural. That is to say, neither flat nor sharp. So, D to B is a major sixth. When we identify the interval on the score, we use a capital M for major. In this example, we have D to B flat. It's still a sixth if you count from the bottom note to the top note. But as we just noted, in the D major scale, B should be natural. Since the B is flat, it's a half step below the major sixth, so it's a minor sixth. Minor intervals are a half step smaller than the major intervals. We show this with a lowercase m and the number 6. When identifying the type of seventh interval, we first have D up to C sharp. Remember, in your D major scale, C is sharp, so this is a major seventh. But D to C natural is a slightly smaller interval, and it is a minor seventh. Now, let's explore seconds and thirds that we've become used to seeing. D to F sharp is a major third, since the F is sharp in the D major scale. If we lower the F sharp by half a step to F natural, we have a minor third. Finally, we'll look at seconds. I've notated these as melodic intervals so that we can see them more easily. D to E is a major second, while D to E flat is a minor second. Some people find counting the half steps between notes to be an easier way to identify intervals. For example, the notes of a minor second are a half step apart. There are 2 half steps between the notes of a major second. There are 3 half steps in a minor third and 4 half steps in a major third. It can be trickier to identify the number of half steps quickly as the size of the intervals increases. But if this is your preferred identification method, there are 8 half steps in a minor sixth, 9 half steps in a major sixth, 10 half steps in a minor seventh, and 11 half steps in a major seventh. Let's get back to playing and review a couple of prepared pieces. First, we'll do the overlapping pedal exercise. As you play, listen carefully and compare your performance to mine. Notice how my pedal helps to connect one chord to the next. 1, 2, 3, play. Next, let's check in on the theme from At School. Remember, your left hand will be an octave higher than written. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll let you decide whether or not you need to review that piece on your own this week. If you need more time to assimilate the correct chords, rhythms, and finger crossings in the melody without pausing, I'd suggest working on it again this week. Finally, I have one new piece that I'd like to introduce. First, let me play it for you. 1, 2, 3. This is really an etude that I've written for you. It is meant to prepare you for a piece by a composer named Turk, hence the title A Turkish Tune. As you may have noticed, the piece is in G major, and your hands remain in the G major 5-finger position throughout. What makes this selection somewhat tricky is the coordination between the hands. I'd encourage you to practice each hand separately. Then, when you feel ready to try it hands together, jump straight to measure 5 and practice the second half first. I expect that these measures will require much more practice and repetition. I would like to point out the dynamic notations in measures 3 and 7. CRESC is the abbreviation for crescendo, which means to gradually get louder or stronger. Sometimes it is represented like a long less than sign in mathematics. DIM in measure 7 is the abbreviation for diminuendo, and it means to gradually get softer. Sometimes it is called decrescendo too. The long greater than sign is another way that composers can indicate that you should get softer. As you decrescendo, try to play each note just a little softer than the one that came before. Try to incorporate those dynamics as you practice this week. Well, we've learned some more detailed theoretical background with respect to scales and intervals today. And we've begun playing full octave scales with separate hands. I've also introduced 2 new pieces, and I encouraged you to refine the Diabelli dance. For next time, please practice the following: the 2-hand tetrachord major scales, 1 octave each, in C, G, D, A, and F major. The separate hand 1 octave scale in D, G, and C major. The overlapping pedal exercise. The dance by Diabelli, but focus on the musical details and the technique this week. Practice minor romp, hands together, a Turkish tune, and get comfortable with its separate hands and then try it hands together slowly before next time. Remember to take time to enjoy yourself as you practice this week. Even if you don't feel as though you are improving, I want to remind you that the music has gotten much harder, and I am pushing you to learn new technique and skills at each lesson. You really have improved. You might even take time to review music from earlier in our course to remind yourself of just how far you've come. But until next time, happy practicing.